Released this year in February, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the second part of Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy, which has a lot to live up to. Not only because to follow up the conclusion of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which left people confused and unknowing anything's gonna happen, but also because it has to add in the open world segment of Final Fantasy VII, which Remake omitted. So this entry had a lot to live up to in terms of doing this, and I remember so many people trying to make comparisons to this being the quote-unquote Star Wars Empire Strikes Back of Final Fantasy VII, and people use your words. I've never seen Star Wars. I don't know what that means. So the main story idea is that following the events of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the characters are basically on their way to try and stop Sephiroth. As simple as that, really. I mean, there's stuff like the characters not knowing where to go, and they just kind of follow these mysterious black robe people for like the entire goddamn game, because these characters have no idea what they're doing. But it's pretty much the main premise, is try to stop Sephiroth. There's other stuff going on in the background, but as for what our heroes are going through, that's basically what their goal is. The reason I say it has a lot to live up to is because of the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake, and spoilers for that game incoming, basically end on the note that characters aren't basically tied to destiny, that things can change to be different, maybe not, maybe for the worse, who knows, but that they can choose, make their own choice in life. So basically it's trying the idea that's trying to be different from the original Final Fantasy VII, and left things on a mysterious note, hence the tagline, the unknown journey continues. So it gets a little up to that, and I feel like it basically squanders every potential it had. Because it feels like now it's playing it too safe and recreating the events of Final Fantasy VII too closely, to the point where it makes the whole entire, we're going to do things differently, kind of entirely pointless to that overall narrative. Like, events do play out differently, but basically only slightly differently, to the point where they're just worse than the OG. Like, they're not as grim, but they still basically have like the almost the same plot beat kind of thing. Which is why it feels like it's just weird how they decided to handle that. It basically feels like any idea of changing things was gone. Like, I did not like the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake. By the way, you know what? You want something different? Alright, what do you got? And it turns out they didn't really have anything. Just like Remake, they need to freaking shove in a lot more filler content in order to extend the playtime. So Rebirth also does that with probably more annoying filler than Remake, because they want to take advantage of the fact that we have a big open world for this game with several different regions, which are cool to explore, except for Cosmo Canyon region. That one sucks. But the problem is, entire chapters of the game can be almost entirely just filler content that adds nothing to the overall story. And there's also new content added in that, while it does try to add more lore and stuff to the story, it feels so out of place, because it feels like it wasn't given in sold segments so it can breathe and the old content can breathe. It's instead shoved right next to the old content. Major moments will just be completely undercut by some new content that may or may not even add anything to the narrative. Like, it just feels like a weird, like they don't know where to put this stuff, and it just feels incredibly weird and just jarring. Like, I don't know why it's handled like that, and why we have 33 hours in this game. We can have the new content, the new story content, breathe and basically have its own room, but no, just shove it in awkwardly at places. Final Fantasy VII original PS1 was known for a lot of mini-games. I don't like those mini-games, I mean that noted. 7 Remake also has mini-games. I don't like those mini-games, I think they're good. 7 Rebirth not only has minigames like the others, but it also adds in so many of them, and minigames aren't the problem. The problem is when they're mandatory. There are entire segments of this game, entire chapters, just dedicated to mandatory minigames. And it also feels weird because the characters are actively just choosing to basically just ignore what they should be doing to just go have fun and do this whole time minigame event. Like Coast of the Soul, a short segment original, is now just one entire hour-plus long minigame fest. And the minigames aren't good and annoying, and these characters feel like they have no urgency.
Let's find a hotel and shower first. Then we can go.
You better not be suggesting we all hit the beach. Hey, I saw that. Don't go thinking I didn't. You two said it with your eyes.
Liz, don't tell me you're alone.
I'm here for all walk here. Help me.
Beach is
Oh my god.
and one's not a party.
Lose this power.
Hang
I'm being forced.
You
Okay, not for the
look
walk.
like you're on the
Before
walk.
no.
If you're in the market for some beach attire, why not participate in Costa del Amor? What's that?
Like, it feels like at any point you want to go, hey, we'll just take a break here, right here. Like, it's just weird, especially when there are moments where Sephiroth is taunting Cloud, which should be their wake-up call to, we need to go. But instead it's, no, let's just have fun. Like, that's the thing. The player choosing to ignore the main plot to do side content, that's one thing. If the characters actively are disregarding the danger of what's going on, it makes your danger feel so unimportant because even the characters are ignoring it. And when you're trying to very much highlight the threat of Sephiroth in this game, it feels weird when he's taunting the party and the party chooses to go, yeah, whatever, Sephiroth, let's go have fun at the beach, guys! Like, huh? Am I supposed to take Sephiroth seriously or not? You also have new story moments that could have led to pretty cool change in the narrative, but for some reason they just don't fully commit to it in the slightest, and it's just so weird that they would bring up, like, it's the idea of someone holding out their hand and going, hey, isn't this cool? And then they crush it right in front of you. That's how the narrative of this game feels. Like, cool ideas, and they just do nothing with it. Now time for the combat, which, oh my god, it's like they took every issue I had with VII Remake and improved upon it. The bosses losing their stagger during phase change, no longer a thing. The stagger meter stays the same during phase change. Thank you. Now you can actually deal good damage on the boss, rather than just having the boss decide, I don't feel like taking big damage. So that's super cool. The dodge for characters is better. They can now also have before VII Remake, needing the deadly dodge materia in order to attack out of a dodge. Now something every character can do, and you have cool stuff like the fact that Cloud's dodge attack has him shoot magical projectiles, so now he too is more versatile. He's more a melee person and has magical projectiles. They're not the best move in the game. You still want to actually use magic with Cloud, but it's a cool way of letting him combat and also dodge better, which, thank you, that's a great change for this whole entire thing. Yuffie, who said the DLC was just the best character, is still the best character. They didn't nerf her, oh thank god. But speaking of nerfs, there is also a nerf they did where every character has their levels reduced at the start of the game, and then also the materia is reverted back to their base, which I know they said they're going to do that early on, but kind of feel the characters have no sense of progression. Like, am I supposed to be feeling the character's supposed to be getting stronger to reach Sephiroth's level, or is Sephiroth such a bitch that he loses to people who are firing the most basic fires balls at him? Like, he's just that pathetic, or am I supposed to find him intimidating, kind of thing. But the way they change the characters is super cool. Aerith even has like entirely new gimmicks to her kit, which is just cool ways they're updating the characters in between entries and listening to complaints that Remake had. So that is super cool. Combat in this game is easily the best part. It's just constantly fun to play the game. Doing the combat is super fun. You also have a lot of stuff in the open world that kind of feels samey at points because of the fact that, oh, there's always a summon to find, or oh, there's always the lore things to find of Gaia, and etc. But you do have also side quests that I don't really like doing, but they help the characters flesh out more so than any filler segment that VII Remake did. So that is cool. It helps add onto their character and highlight their personality. So that's cool. But there's also the proto-relic side quests, which I hate the act of doing these quests. They are some of the worst stuff in this entire game, and they are not fun to do. But do them anyway, because they are tied to the character Gilgamesh, and everyone needs some Final Fantasy V goodness in their life. So please do them, because it leads to an optional boss, but that boss is easily the best boss fight in the game, and if you're a Final Fantasy V fan, you owe it to yourself to fight that boss and just bask in how amazing it is. That end reward is super cool, but the path to get it is so annoying that I can't blame anyone that just decides to basically call the proto-relic side quest quits early on. It's also weird how, while those quest lines are usually more just for filler-esque, or for some reason we're expanding on characters that don't matter. Listen, I don't care about Beck's badasses, you never will make me. Even the devs didn't think they're that interesting. But there is one thing where one of the quest lines actually expands on the Avalanche, and it feels weird how an actual good thing to add to dynamic and character is added here in Rebirth and not in Remake where it belonged. Like, having more dynamic for Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and Barret, and Tifa should have been in the last game. Not here where it's basically pointless and too late to really be trying to add more to them here. It also just feels random since none of the other pro-red quest lines are like that at all. As for exploration, you do run on Chocobos. I do like they're different variety of Chocobos. The problem is getting them because some of them require stealth segments in a non-stealth game for some reason, or the fact that each Chocobo is basically bogged down to be able to do one thing specifically, and some of their gimmicks kind of feel like they're added in for the sake of having a gimmick, right? And something that actually adds to the actual overworld. Like, hey, here's a black Chocobo that climbs up walls. Okay, but what does that actually add to the game, you know? Like, just feels weird, like, we made the whole entire thing, but it doesn't really feel good to really use. And why is a black Chocobo climbing walls and not flying? Why? But different Chocobos, one of which is pretty cool and fun to use, which is from the Nibelheim region. But there's just, but like I said, it kind of just feels like we could have done more. It also feels weird how we have Chocobos, but then also the buggy. We can only use the buggy in one region, which also just feels entirely weird to handle. While I also praise the combat gameplay, the dungeons, while are better, since we're not constricted to being in one freaking city the entire game, are better, and I do like how each character gets their own segment of being the leader for a dungeon, which is super cool, although I wish that segments for like Tifa, Aerith, and Cait Sith were better, because Tifa's segment is just going through a dungeon you already went through as Cloud, but slightly different. Aerith's segment keeps getting interrupted by stuff unrelated to Aerith, and the Cait dungeon is just the worst one in the entire game. It feels like they had no actual good idea of how to actually use his quirks, like, effectively for a cool dungeon. And also, Cait says, Ketchy, how you want to pronounce his name, his dungeon just feels like entirely filler. So that just also sucks entirely. But hey, they give character a spotlight to shine and add on to them, which is super cool, both gameplay-wise and story-wise. Although I don't like how now they decide to resort to have Yuffie be closer to her OG counterpart, which is more energetic and goofy, and actively calls herself the comedic relief. When the DLC did her character so great, but now it feels like, I don't want to say it erases it, because she still has that experience in her mind, but it feels like we're not capitalizing on it, rather than just focusing on, now we need to have her be like the OG game. Like, it just feels weird, you know? Speaking of characters, I also find them more unlikable a bit in this one, mostly because Cloud will have so many issues that the party knows he's going through, but then will just do nothing to assist him, which makes them feel kind of like dickheads for basically ignoring their friend who clearly needs help, instead just berating him at points. Like, they acknowledge something's not wrong with him, but rather than going, no Cloud, we're getting to see a doctor, no ifs, ands, or buts, they let him reject help at one time. It's like, your friend needs help here, guys. Why are you doing this? No, Tifa. Just running up and hugging the man isn't enough. He needs some serious assistance here.
Stop. Please.
I'm good. Ah, there it is.
The hell's gotten into you, man?
Then you also have, because it's 100% remake, but it's what's also on the box art Rebirth, the addition of Zack in this game, who due to the events of VII Remake is now alive in this game, and they just squander every potential with him imaginable. Like, he basically does nothing of note worth until closer to the game's climax, which is kind of the thing of Super Remake, Super Rebirth, where the only really things that matter in the story happen in the finale. Like, the rest of the game feels inconsequential by comparison to what the game's finale shows you, which is inherently a bad thing. Because I like games like What of Final Fantasy and Stranger of Paradise, which also have like stuff be more backloaded, where the important stuff happens at the very end of the game. But when you have a game that feels stretched out because of the added filler content that doesn't add anything, having your important stuff be at the very end also makes it feel even more annoying as a result. Especially when, you know, you use a lot of the stuff from the game's close to the game's finale in your marketing rather than the other stuff in the game, you know? Okay, this part will just mostly be a nitpick, but something that really confuses me. So in this game, like many games recently, the game will use like stuff that's like painted yellow to indicate to the player this is the pathway forward. It's like, okay, that's one thing. The problem is, VII Rebirth also has segments where the player is forced to go in one direction. And then there's segments where the game will put a blue arrow to point the player in the right direction. If you're gonna do that, then why also have the yellow paint segments? Instead, the yellow paint segments are just more or less tell you, do not bother interacting with anything in this world unless you see this one thing. Which kind of just makes it feel like the world basically was designed to look cool first presentation wise, but gameplay wise was completely secondary, is why they need the markers to even tell you where you're supposed to go. It's weird how there's one segment where Yuffie actually makes signs for the player to follow, which is a nice and cute character moment. But then they put the yellow paint and the blue arrows anyway, making that kind of pointless detail. It's like, why even have Yuffie make signs for the player to follow? It's just gonna do the same method anyway. It feels like the developers are just have no confidence the player will find the right pathway, or they're unconfident in their own level design, so you need to constantly tell the player what's interactable and what's not. Nothing feels more natural to the world, and just pretty much tells the player, don't bother touching anything unless we say so. Which is kind of what you want to do, because with games, the developer can't be there to correct any questions the player has, which is why you need better cohesion, good tutorials, and everything in your game. So just have so many different ways of just trying to point the player in the right direction feels like developers basically just aren't confident in how they actually made the level design, or it's an issue that they acknowledge, which is why you need to have a band-aid fix. But I know this is a pet peeve in the grand scheme of things, and doesn't really truly affect VII Rebirth all that much, which doesn't affect other games all that much, despite it being a topic people really don't like. Like, I'm gonna say something that sounds weird about this game that I have to explain. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth feels like it cares more about celebrating Final Fantasy VII than actually being Final Fantasy VII. But that what I mean is, moments, even small moments of Final Fantasy VII are like made more grander and a spectacle because, oh, you expect these moments to be big, so they want to be even bigger and blow your mind. But they spend so much time trying to make these small moments bigger, like, oh, Costa Soul needs all these mini games. Gold Saucer needs to be bigger and more expanded, and stuff like that, that it basically feels like it's not focusing on just being the story of Final Fantasy VII at points. Like, I know many people say that Final Fantasy V feels like it's too comedic and has no story, which I would disagree with. But if someone says that has no story, then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth feels like it wrote an IOU for a story, because it cares more about having big bombastic moments that don't really add to the story. But it's like, it's the idea that the devs think, oh, because this moment was well liked in the original, we need to have this bigger. The Gold Saucer has to be bigger and crazier. It's like how some remake, oh, Wall Market has to be crazier and bigger, but it gets so focuses on being so big that it basically loses like the point of the sequence in itself, you know? I wonder if that makes sense, but that's how I feel. Like, it cares more about celebrating Final Fantasy VII without actually trying to do what Final Fantasy VII tried to do. Overall, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I feel is a better game than Remake. The combat, like just for the combat alone, the story I think gets worse. And if Remake had divisive ending, Rebirth has an ending that people just flat out seem to loathe. And I get why, because of how developers handled it, and developers admit they could just make things better, but choose not to. Like, just the fact that that's annoying, but the combat alone is just super fun with this game. Going to the regions is also fun, and it definitely feels like they listen to the fan feedback, specifically in terms of combat. I hear people say that in terms of story. No, the story is they're still doing whatever they're trying to do, but combat-wise, they improve things, and it's just a way better game to play, which I think Rebirth is way better than 7 Remake. It's just super cool. Now they have more party members to use, but you still have 2 characters who can't be used playable yet, which I feel weird. They're part of advertising as if they're part of the squad. Sit your butts down, Sith and Vincent. You can't do nothing yet. So, kind of one entire thing weird, but hey, the fact that the characters are more better to play as, combat's good. Do the pro-reddit quest line for that hidden boss fight. You won't regret it. That's just super cool. Lots of content actually feels more fun to do as opposed to when remakes, more mobile experience. That is super dope. That is super great, and Super Rebirth, just a super fun game. But I just feel that it squanders every narrative potential that this game could have had with the idea set forth in Remake.